This is the Successful Archi Students podcast, episode 2. You want to run your own architecture firm, you want to be successful at architecture, you have to have a clear vision and a goal of how you're going to get there and what it actually is. So you're an Archi student. You're smart, you're creative, and heck, you're ready to take on the world with your crazy designs. Before you get to that point, however, you need to build up the habits and the knowledge and the skills of a successful architect. And what most students don't realize is that you don't learn these things over time. Rather, you learn these things through experience and deliberate practice outside of your university education. My name's Kyle, I'm an Archi student just like you, and I'm committed to being successful, no matter what it will take. And I'm hoping you're ready to take that journey with me as you listen to the Successful Archi Student podcast. Welcome to the second episode of the Successful Archi Student podcast. That's right, today is number 2. That doesn't really sound right. Anyways, today I'll be talking a little bit more about what I was talking about in the last episode, about the number 1 tip for successful Archi students. In that episode, I talked about the importance of fixing your mindset, which I understand is quite difficult to understand if there's no further clarification on that, so I'm going to try and clear some things up about what I meant by that. A lot of people and students talk themselves down and have a lot of negative self-talk and thoughts without really noticing it, and it really limits their potential and their skill level. Telling yourself you can't do something immediately closes off that as an option. So what I mean by this is to say, if you're telling yourself you can't get a job after you graduate because there's no jobs out there, or if you're trying to get into university and you're telling yourself you can't afford it, or maybe you've seen some other people's their student work on Instagram, and you're telling yourself your work will never be as good as that. These objections only become true when you realize them as being true. Until then, they are completely achievable. So rather than saying it's not possible, ask yourself, how can I make it possible? If no one is hiring, well, that's the perfect opportunity to start your own work. If you can't get into university because you can't afford it, well, you're living in the age of fundraising. You know, there's 1,000,001 ways to raise the capital you need to be able to go to university, and just telling yourself that you can't afford it is just kind of an excuse for not being able to do it. If you're telling yourself your project will never look that good, rather than doing that, ask yourself, how can I make my project look as good as that or better? So this would take time and practice to turn this into a habit. The idea of replacing I can't with how can I? But I truly believe that once you start implementing this idea and this habit, you'll be opened up to so many more opportunities that you never realized before. When I told my friends and family that I work over 30 hours a week at my part-time job and study full-time, obviously putting in a lot of hours into my education, and I mentioned that I want to start my own brand to help students succeed, they kind of just laughed at me and told me it's not possible. And if I had listened to them and said, oh yeah, it's not possible, I don't have time to be able to do that, then I wouldn't be here today talking on this podcast. Instead, I respected the idea that this is their opinions, and instead I asked myself, how can I make this possible? How can I work over almost full-time hours at my part-time job and study full-time as well, putting in close to 80 hours a week into my education, and still have time to work on Successful Archi Student? The answer involved a lot of late nights and kind of sacrificing some of the more luxurious things in life, like sitting on the couch and watching Netflix and scrolling through social media. But I fully committed to this, and now I'm waking up every morning working on something I'm truly passionate about. But often when I talk about delaying gratification and putting off kind of the luxurious things in life now so that you can have them later in life at a multiplied level, they aren't usually luxurious things at all. Things like scrolling through social media or sitting on the couch watching reality TV shows, they're not really fulfilling things in life. I'd much prefer to be working on something that truly gets me fired up and something I'm passionate about. And we kind of just get carried away in this day and age with these things we react to. So we kind of get caught up reacting to these things instead of creating our own stuff and working on something that we plan to have done. That's why procrastination is really popular at the moment, because we do just get carried away with these instant gratifiers that just carry us away on being reactive rather than creative. And I do think this kind of happens because of a fear of missing out. We fear we're missing out on watching the new show, or fear of missing out that we're going to miss one of our friends' posts and we're not going to like it, and they're going to notice that and they're going to roast us about it. But I truthfully believe that we're fearing missing out on the wrong thing. But how do you build up that passion to be doing something you love every single day, working on architecture, working on cool buildings, and doing what you love every single day? It's kind of like if you're aiming at a dartboard blindsided, trying to hit the bullseye. You're not really going to hit it if you've got a blindfold on, your eyes are closed. It's really hard to hit that bullseye. If you want to hit the bullseye, you have to be clear-sightedly looking at it, aiming at it, using all your attention on that, and truly being tunnel visioned on it, so that you're only focused on that. And that's exactly like life. If you're trying to get somewhere in life, you want to run your own architecture firm, you want to be successful at architecture, you have to have a clear vision and a goal of how you're going to get there and what it actually is. If you actually know what you want out of life, it makes it so much easier to start working towards it and start structuring a plan and working towards that goal. So I think my kind of call to action here is to write down your goals and constantly come back to them and revise them and rethink them and restructure them. And then over time, you'll find yourself just being way more motivated and keen to succeed because of this. And you can actually start making it happen just by having that vision in mind and knowing what it is you want to achieve. It does involve discipline and hard work, but that's just a requirement of success. It's something that needs to be done, so you may as well do it sooner than later. So to recap over this episode, stop telling yourself negative things. If you're saying you can't do something, then you can't do it. But if you're asking yourself the question of how can I achieve this, how can I make this possible, then it makes it easier, and you're not limiting yourself to not being able to achieve that thing. Once you start writing down your goals and you start to realize the life that you want to live, and you have a bigger vision of that, then you start to realize you fear missing out on some really silly things such as social media and sitting on the couch watching Netflix. And the idea of that, it takes time and hard work and discipline to be successful. So you may as well put in that hard work, discipline, and time sooner than later. So that's the number one tip I have for architecture students, is to know what you're aiming at. And it makes it so much easier to achieve stuff when you've got a vision of it, and you can start to plan and schedule towards that to make it possible. Thank you guys so much for watching the episode. I really appreciate you guys' support. And until next time, enjoy your studies. Hey guys, I just want to take a quick moment to say thank you for listening to today's episode. The great thing about the show being a podcast is that you can listen to this wherever you go. So if you're on the bus to uni, or you're walking home from work, or you're making dinner, or you're at the gym, it doesn't matter where you are. You can listen to this podcast and get some information from other architects and architecture students like myself. So if that's something you're interested in doing, you can just head over to the show notes in the description of this video. From there, you can find the different platforms that we're on. So we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Podcasts, we're on Spotify, Deezer, Castbox, and a couple of other ones as well. Subscribe to us and follow to us on there so you don't miss out. Also, if you guys want to be on the show, which is something I'm really interested in doing, just send me an email at kyle@successfularchistudent.com. So that's KYLE@successfularchistudent.com. And I'll bring you onto the show to talk about anything architecture, and we can share some ideas and learn from one another. Thanks again, guys. I really do appreciate your support and all the comments that you guys leave on these podcasts. And until next time, I'll see you on the next episode of the Successful Archi Student Podcast.